In this movie, Miller's girl, Jenna Ortega, who is Cairo, makes her teacher happy in the other room by doing the same with him and also with her female friend for her benefit. The movie begins by showing 18-year-old Cairo lives alone in a mansion left to her by her parents, who live permanently abroad. She spends her days in solitude, reading literature and writing to escape her loneliness and hope to find love someday. One school day, she met a writer and teacher named Mr. Miller, who, like her, found inspiration in the small town. She arrived in Mr. Miller's class an hour early as she lives close in Lavelle Street. She mentioned her friend Winnie had recommended his class to her. Mr. Miller was surprised to learn she lived on that street, as he believed only ghosts lived there. Cairo told him her parents were lawyers and that she aspired to be one too. Mr. Miller gave her the list of literature for the semester, shocked to find out she had already read 16 of them during the holidays. When Winnie arrived, they exchanged casual greetings before leaving to get snacks. Meanwhile, Mr. Miller, curious, browsed through Cairo's literature collection on her table. His friend Boris brought him snacks and jokingly accused him of reading porn books. Miller defended himself, explaining they were for a student. Together, they perused Cairo's romantic novels and discovered she had also read Miller's book, Apostrophes and Ampersands, making her the first person to do so. Later, when Miller returned home, he excitedly told his wife about Cairo and how she had checked out his book at the library. They celebrated with wine in the living room, taking a break from their routine. Miller played music and asked his wife to dance, enjoying the simple joy of the moment together. They got intimate while they were dancing, but his wife's phone rang. It broke the mood. She told him she would make it up to him later and left to attend to the phone call. Miller and Boris sat in the field the next day, eating. When Cairo walked in, Miller asked what music she was listening to. Boris made fun of her when she mentioned Celine Dion, which made Miller tell her about the time Boris cried loudly to the background music on Titanic during his bachelor's party. Boris offered Cairo some of his biscuits, and told her not to tell anyone he makes biscuits or cry watching a movie, as it would ruin his reputation as a baseball coach. Later, when Mr. Boris walked past the hallway, Winnie threw her books on the floor to call his attention as she flirted with him. Cairo caught her and asked her what she was up to. She responded that she was just being an equal opportunist. Winnie was hanging out at Cairo's place after school, while Cairo struggled with her Yale application essay. She didn't know what to write as an achievement and asked Winnie for suggestions. Winnie, having no idea, suggested that Cairo could write about the teacher-student affair and create a narrative around it. Cairo asked her friend if she was serious about doing the do with Mr. Boris, and she responded that she might and thinks it will be sensational as it would be her first time. She then told Cairo that she notices the way Mr. Miller looks at her in class, like she's the only thing of color in his life. Cairo didn't believe Mr. Miller thought of her in that manner, so she shunned Winnie. Later that night, Cairo came across something about a man's love in one of her literary works and wondered what muse inspired the writer. The next day in class, she noticed Mr. Miller staring at her. She realized her friend was right and felt good about it. While Mr. Miller shared each student's script, he whispered to Cairo to see him after school. Mr. Miller praised Cairo's latest essay. She informed him she was leaving town for Yale as she didn't like it here. Mr. Miller encouraged to discover more about the town before judging it. He discussed her essay, which she wrote about a reluctant spider, then recited some of her writing to her, thrilling her that he remembered it well enough to recite. He applauded her and praised her intelligence, suggesting she write a short story in the style of her favorite author, which could be a highlight of her application essay to Yale. Cairo said she would be thrilled to write the story. Cairo mentioned she had read Miller's book. He revealed that 3 reviewers had criticized it for lacking ambition, but Cairo disagreed, describing it as grand and tragic, a romantic horror. She recited part of the book, including the man's love, which pleased Mr. Miller. He admitted it was the first thing he wrote that felt tangible. Cairo asked why he hadn't written in a while, and when he couldn't find a clear reason, she concluded he was uninspired and challenged him to write something. Winnie stumbled in, and Cairo used it as an excuse to leave, claiming Winnie was hungry. At home, Miller's wife was impressed and asked about Cairo, and Miller explained that Cairo was more extraordinary and talented than Winnie. Boris added that Miller was coaching her to be like him, but Miller simply admitted he loved teaching. His wife agreed that he was better suited to teaching than writing, especially since he stopped writing on his own after his work received negative reviews. She challenged him, suggesting he knew how to write but chose teaching because of the criticism his writing received. Cairo went to the poetry salon Miller advised her to, hoping to see Mr. Miller. After sitting down, Mr. Miller joined her, and they talked for a while before Eliot, a 3-time award winner, took the podium to read his work. Afterward, Miller and Cairo stood in the courtyard, and she admitted she had expected the readings to be bad but was pleasantly surprised by how good they were. They shared a cigarette, and Cairo realized she was not only falling for him but also that they were both outsiders who understood each other. Cairo was looking gorgeous in her dress, and this grabs the attention of Miller and Boris. Cairo suggested Boris could sell his biscuits to raise money for his baseball team, with Winnie helping him design a logo. Boris agreed and went inside. Cairo sat beside Miller, and he offered her a cigarette. Miller's wife texted him, suggesting they go on a weekend getaway, which excited him. Winnie asked Cairo what Mr. Miller had said about her outfit. Cairo replied that his expression spoke volumes. In class, they found Miller packing for his weekend getaway with his wife. Cairo told him she had chosen him as the basis for her story because of his unconventional style, which he appreciated. He bid them goodbye and left. Later, Winnie exaggerated how Cairo was seducing Mr. Miller, and Mr. Boris came in, informing Winnie about Cairo's idea for his biscuits and asking for her help with the logo. Winnie agreed to help and asked for Mr. Boris's phone to type out the details. Cairo complained she couldn't find her phone, so Winnie called her number with Mr. Boris's phone and placed it in her bra. Mr. Boris requested his phone when they reached the door, and Winnie retrieved it from her bra and handed it to him. After waiting for his wife for 40 minutes as she tended to business, Miller received a call from an unfamiliar phone in his bag. It was Cairo calling, and her phone was in his bag. He told his wife he needed to drop something off for a student. When he reached Cairo's house to return the phone, she was dressed in a dinner dress and moved very close to him in the rain, kissing him. Miller stared at his laptop screen when Cairo sent him the story he had asked her to write. Back home, he printed Cairo's story and began reading. In Cairo's story, Mr. Miller, referred to as Mr. Murphy, drove to her driveway. They moved inside while she smoked in front of him. Mr. Murphy took the cigarettes from her hands, instructed her to read to him, and as she picked up his book, he guided her face to the edge of the bed, showing her where to read. They engaged in intercourse while she read. Mr. Miller felt goosebumps while he read the story. The next day in school, Mr. Miller told Cairo to pick another author and write something else. He said what she wrote was pornographic and unacceptable. Cairo countered that it was their story, and he couldn't just disregard the story or them after he inspired it. Mr. Miller threatened to fail her if she didn't rewrite the essay and made it clear to her that the only relationship that could ever happen between them is that of teacher and student, and whatever she feels is more for her to deal with. Cairo told him that the problem was not with her writing because it was really good, but that the problem was that he once thought he could amount to something, but he didn't have the courage for it. She explained that the reviewer's comments about his first book meant that he wasn't brave enough to be better, was deliberately impotent, and was mediocre. She dared him to fail her, but he must make sure it means something to him because the cost will be very high. She concluded that he must be a disappointment to those who thought he'd be great, and that was why he hides himself in the small town. She left his class feeling heartbroken and left school. She cried and drank heavily, with Winnie sitting with her when she got home. Mr. Miller also complained of a bad day when he got home, and his wife offered him some alcohol. Cairo told Winnie that she said many things to affect him, and he is a pretender. Miller told his wife that he had an unpleasant conversation with Cairo about the midterm assignment because she wrote a story to make him look like Dr. Seuss as an author, and her strong use of vulgar words made his wife excited. She told him to show him. After he showed her the story, she saw the last part, where she wrote, "For Jonathan, love Cairo." She told him that Cairo wrote it as a love letter to him, and told him to tell her how she described him. Then she moved closer to make out with him in her drunken state as he explained what Cairo wrote to her. Cairo told Winnie to distract herself by texting Boris. She instructed her to tell him that she was texting him while drunk and trying to do the do with Cairo. Boris replied, advising her to go to bed instead. Feeling upset, Cairo asked Winnie if she really wanted to do the do with her, and Winnie responded affirmatively. Then Cairo proposed that they both do it and send a picture to Boris, which they did. Winnie asked if she was going to text Mr. Miller, and she replied that he is her enemy now. To punish him, she turned in her story to the vice principal. Then Mr. Miller got a call that he was summoned to the vice principal's office because of the ending note in Cairo's story. Mr. Miller feared that Cairo would want to imply that they had did something together, which could cost him his job. His wife asked if they really did do the do, and he replied that he didn't, so she told him to fix it. In school, Cairo did not attend his class. After the class, Winnie grumpily walked to Mr. Miller and asked if he knew about Cairo's whereabouts because she couldn't find her. But Mr. Miller shunned her. In the vice principal's office, the vice principal asked how they got close, if they spent time together after school, and if they attended gatherings outside school. Mr. Miller responded that he saw her talent, wanted to help her grow, and had only been in her personal space when he wanted to return her phone to her house and her parents were not around. Cairo replied that they were both attracted to each other. He gave her special treatment. They went to a poetry party together, and he had even gone to her house when her parents were not in town. Mr. Miller's words didn't count against Cairo's, so he got suspended. When he told his wife, she told him it was his fault for sweet-talking with the teenage girl just because she read his book, making him feel some kind of self-worth. Mr. Miller agreed that Cairo made him feel like he was worthy of something good compared to her, who was always drunk. His wife told him that being drunk was the only way she could deal with him because she couldn't stand him. She told him that he is a liar and pretentious, making everyone feel like the villain when he is the real villain. Mr. Miller asked his wife if she didn't worry about him, but she replied she was only worried she'd die of boredom listening to his rants. Winnie went to Cairo's house, questioning why she was punishing Mr. Miller for choosing his wife over her. Cairo said he underestimated her and she'd make him pay by testifying against him in court. Winnie threatened to testify against Cairo to protect Mr. Miller's career, but Cairo promised to show the school a compromising picture she sent to Mr. Boris, risking his job. Winnie realized she'd been played and warned Cairo it wasn't a game. Cairo concluded her essay questioning if Mr. Miller would give up or turn his predicament into something meaningful. She felt like an adult, realizing she'd be accountable for her choices. Despite the pain, she believed the experience would shape her into something new. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. I would also appreciate a comment because it helps like you can't even imagine. It's a new channel and every bit of support counts.